Today is Tuesday, October 24th. What to know about a warning the U.S. has for militias in the Middle East who are apparently ready to ramp up attacks against American troops, just as fighting is also escalating in the Gaza Strip. Also, the first significant snowstorm of the season is moving across the U.S. And we have details about a mega merger in the oil industry, the second one just this month. Plus, plans for dozens of new tech hubs, new rules for this year's NBA season, and everything dating should be a team sport. If so, one popular app wants you to get your friends and family involved. Those stories and more news to know next. Welcome to The Newsworthy. All the day's news in around 10 minutes. Fast, fair, fun, and on the go. I'm Erica Mandy. Thanks so much for being here. You ready? Let's do this. The United States is starting to express more concern that the war in the Middle East could spark a wider conflict that could even include attacks on American troops. This comes as Israel ramps up airstrikes in what the Israeli military says is in preparation for a ground invasion in the Gaza Strip. Israel struck hundreds of targets in Gaza yesterday in one of the biggest barrages of this war so far. And Israeli military leaders are promising even more unrelenting attacks aimed at the Hamas group in retaliation for terror attacks earlier this month. Well, in Gaza, the death toll has been rising. Buildings have been flattened, and the UN says about 1.5 million Palestinians have had to flee their homes. Unfortunately, casualties are expected to increase even more dramatically once a ground offensive begins, which Israeli military leaders say will happen soon. But Iranian-backed fighters are warning of an escalation if that ground offensive is really launched, and not just against Israel. They're also talking about targeting American forces deployed in the Middle East. Already, the American National Security spokesman said there's been an uptick in rocket and drone attacks on U.S. troops in Iraq and Syria. Military personnel have been able to hold back many of the attacks, but others have caused some damage and minor injuries. And the Pentagon warned again yesterday that the U.S. will, quote, not hesitate to protect our forces. Meanwhile, the U.S. is also recommending Israel not rush into a ground war before the U.S. has a chance to get military assets in place and prepared in case the conflict expands. The U.S. also wants more time to negotiate the release of more hostages. Speaking of which, Hamas released 2 more hostages yesterday. An 85-year-old woman and a 79-year-old woman, both from Israel, were set free, in part because of negotiations between Hamas and the Egyptian government, which has been working as a mediator. This comes just days after 2 Americans were also released. Still, there are more than 200 people thought to still be in captivity, including at least 10 more Americans. To be continued. House Republicans plan to meet this morning to choose their 3rd Speaker nominee in 3 weeks. There are now 8 candidates vying for the gavel since one dropped out yesterday, and the 2 earlier nominees could not secure enough votes. The Washington Post says the candidates left standing fall all across the Republican ideological spectrum, and it's not clear if any of them have enough support to really survive a full House vote. But yesterday, all of the candidates signed a pledge to support whoever becomes the nominee, meaning the Republican who gets nominated has at least 8 votes in the bag. They'll need 217. And they won't have a lot more time to pitch themselves to their colleagues. Lawmakers say the next full House vote will happen as soon as possible, since lawmakers can't do anything else until a speaker is elected. Stay tuned. It's not just Silicon Valley anymore. The Biden administration designated 31 new technology hubs in the U.S. They're now eligible for grants that were already authorized through the bipartisan CHIPS and Science Act that Congress passed last year. But it's not just about chips. The White House says the hubs span industries like clean energy, artificial intelligence, biotechnology, medicine, quantum computing, and more. The hubs are all over the country in places like Oklahoma, Massachusetts, Colorado, Ohio, South Carolina, Washington, Alabama, and Pennsylvania. And nearly 75% of them are in small communities and rural areas. The point is not to just hand out federal funding, but to attract more private sector investments too and generate economic activity outside of the typical coastal boomtowns. Plus, with all of this, the White House says the U.S. will be able to tap into its full potential and better compete with China. Well, for some of you, it might be time to unpack the winter coats and snow shovels. Today, several states are in the path of the first significant snowstorm of the season in the continental U.S., and up to 2 feet of snow are possible in some areas. The snow has already started falling in the Pacific Northwest and northern Rockies. Next up, the system is expected to stretch across the northern plains and eventually end up in Minnesota by the end of the week. Then a second round of snow could come up by Friday night and continue into the weekend. That system is expected to fall a little further south, too, so it could bring the first flakes of the season to places like Denver and Salt Lake City. And even after the snow moves out, chilly temperatures are expected to stick around for much of the U.S., meaning most Americans could be in for a chillier Halloween than usual. More news is still coming up, but first, a quick break for our sponsor. Lumi is the world's best whole-body deodorant. It is now my personal favorite deodorant, but if you want more proof, Lumi has it. It's clinically proven to control odor-causing bacteria everywhere for 72 hours. I love that it's aluminum-free and paraben-free, goes on easy and clear, and most importantly, has worked to keep me smelling fresh and clean. You can choose from a variety of fresh, bright scents as well, like clean tangerine, lavender sage, or toasted coconut. I even love their body wash as well as their on-the-go deodorant wipes that are great for anywhere on your body, from pits to feet and beyond. Lumi's starter pack is perfect for new customers, too. It comes with a solid stick deodorant, cream tube deodorant, 2 free products of your choice, like that mini body wash and deodorant wipes I mentioned, and free shipping. And as a special offer for listeners, new customers get $5 off a Lumi starter pack with the code NEWSWORTHY at LumiDeodorant.com. That's LUME deodorant.com. It equates to over 40% off your starter pack when you visit LumiDeodorant.com and use the code NEWSWORTHY. Now back to the news. It's about to be the busiest time of year for sports fans. It's already football season, hockey season, the end of baseball and soccer seasons, and then tonight, basketball starts up again. The NBA kicks off its regular season tonight with 2 games. But one of the most highly anticipated games actually happens tomorrow, when the number 1 overall draft pick, Victor Wembanyama, makes his official debut for the San Antonio Spurs. Also making a debut this year, 2 new rule changes. One of them targets exaggerated falls, called flops, that players do in hopes of getting the referee's attention so their opponent gets a foul. Well, this year, the flops themselves will be considered technical fouls. The other rule change has to do with coaches. They can now get an official to review video to double-check a certain call twice in a game, so long as the first time they do it, their challenge is successful. Oh, and the other big change is the NBA is rolling out its new in-season tournament featuring all 30 teams this year. It essentially means some regular season games will count as tournament games. And then the league will hand out the NBA Cup for the first time in December. There's another big merger in the U.S. oil industry. This time, Chevron announced it's going to acquire Hess Corporation in a $53 billion all-stock deal. This comes just after another big blockbuster deal we told you about earlier this month, when Exxon bought Pioneer Natural Resources for even more money. But while Exxon's deal helps it to expand in the Permian Basin, Chevron's goes even further, making it a player in North Dakota's shale patch as well as the offshore Gulf of Mexico. Plus, Hess has developments in offshore Guyana and the Gulf of Thailand. Both Chevron's deal and Exxon's are expected to close early next year as long as regulators sign off. As the New York Times and others point out, these deals show the industry still has a lot of confidence in the future of fossil fuels. The United Auto Workers Union expanded its strike once again. This week, thousands of people stopped working at a plant that makes Ram 1500 trucks, targeting Stellantis' most profitable vehicle. The union took a similar step last week when it shut down a Ford plant where several F-Series Super Duty pickups are made. And overall, there are now about 41,000 UAW workers on strike at 7 Stellantis, Ford, and GM plants. They're seeking 40% pay raises, better health care, a shorter work week, improved pensions for retirees, and so on. So far, the automakers have gone up to 23% pay raises and met at least some of the other conditions. But the union says even though automakers have offered record contracts, auto workers deserve more. And for every offer it gets that it considers insufficient, it announces more walkouts. The union says it's prepared to keep striking for weeks if necessary. Never underestimate the power of Marvel superheroes. A new Marvel video game just broke a record. 2.5 million copies of Spider-Man 2 sold in just 24 hours, making it PlayStation Studios' fastest-selling game ever. The game is actually third in a series, following 2 other Spider-Mans that launched in 2018 and 2020. But this is the first one that's exclusively on the PlayStation 5. Reports say the game is likely to continue its upward sales trend for a while. Tinder now has a new feature that lets friends and family review potential matches for you. It's called Tinder Matchmaker. It lets you invite up to 15 people who can view the profiles of other singles for you. And they don't even need to have Tinder profiles of their own to see your potential matches. They won't be able to message anyone on your behalf, but next time you check out the app yourself, the profiles they liked will be flagged as recommendations. One dating expert told the BBC she's not sure how this feature is going to go over since not everyone on the app is going to be happy with so many people being able to see their profiles without even logging in. But she does also point out that Tinder generally has a good record on data privacy, and Tinder says if you don't want your profile available for matchmaking, you can opt out. Well, that's it for the main news today, so now it's time for Trivia Tuesday, when we ask a different trivia question every week. But first, this episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. Ever have that feeling like your brain is getting in its own way? Whether it's at work, or your social life, or even the ability to fall asleep, I've also had moments where I definitely wonder, what's going on here? Why am I struggling with this thing? And therapy has been a place that helps me actually answer that question and then do something about it. Sometimes we just can't see what's holding us back on our own. But in my experience, therapy helped to give me the skills I need to better understand myself, which then directly impacts the way I think and the actions I take for the better. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online and designed to be convenient and flexible, suited to fit your schedule. You just answer a few questions and quickly get matched with a licensed therapist. And you can switch at any time to find the best therapist for you. Make your brain your friend with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/newsworthy today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, H-E-L-P, betterhelp.com/newsworthy. Okay, now back to Trivia Tuesday. Today's trivia question is, in honor of Halloween next week, how did early New Englanders protect their homes from evil spirits? You can play along with us in our weekly roundup email that comes out each Friday. Simply sign up to get it at thenewsworthy.com/email or find the link in today's episode notes. As for last week's trivia question, how tall was Napoleon Bonaparte? The answer is taller than you might think. Napoleon was just about 5'6", which was actually a little above average for a Frenchman of his time in the early 1800s. Still, for centuries, he's been depicted as short. In fact, the term Napoleon complex is still used, referring to short men who compensate for their lack of height through aggression and otherwise domineering behavior. So where does this misconception come from? Well, it all goes back to a famous British cartoonist, James Gilray. He often portrayed Napoleon in a satirical way as a tiny but boastful character full of rage. When the cartoons first appeared, Napoleon demanded that the British government censor its press. But his demands were ignored, and his image as a small, angry man was so popular that other cartoonists took it up too. At the end of his life, despite becoming one of the greatest military generals of all time, winning dozens of battles, Napoleon spoke about Gilray, saying the cartoonist, quote, did more than all the armies of Europe to bring me down. All right, thank you for listening. And if you get value out of this show, it really helps us out if you tell other people about it. Thank you so much in advance. All right, we'll be back with another news roundup tomorrow. Until then, have a great day.